Going live. Welcome, one and all. It is open for business once again. The lounge at Angel's Citadel. It's Sunday, and we are sitting around a nice bonfire, or at least we imagine that we are. We've got some drinks going on. There's some snacks, nice comfy chairs, and we're sitting around talking tabletop role-playing games with a valued and wonderful guest. He comes to us from Poland and the company Game Machinery, who has just started putting stuff out for a new game that, if you've been watching Angel Citadel for any length of time recently, we're excited about. It's called Defiant, and we'd like to welcome Martin.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to hearing some of your perspectives on running games like Defiant tonight. So I'll go ahead and get started a little bit. When I started reading Defiant, there's a bit at the beginning where you talk about games that have influenced you.
Mhm.
And one of the very first ones that you mentioned is World of Darkness, Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Awakening, things like that, right? Um, I've enjoyed reading those. I've got several editions of them, but I've always struggled running games for games like that, faction games, clan games, family games, making them interesting. I really struggled with that. And it occurred to me that, hey, if I've got that problem, it might be that somebody else has that problem. And maybe we could go around finding somebody that could come on and talk to us a little bit about it. And then we got to thinking, well, shoot, we've been talking about this game Defiant for so long now. We might as well see if we can get them to come on. Wouldn't that be cool? And so we reached out, and fortunately, we managed to get you to stay awake till the wee hours of the morning to come talk to us. So I guess the first thing that I'd ask is, tell us a little bit about um, the experience that you had gaming with those kinds of games early on. What led you to play things like World of Darkness? What called to you about those? What when you've played them, what stuck out to you as the interesting things in your games and your campaigns or whatever?
Oh, sure. Uh, I started playing in 92, I believe. So back then in Poland, it was we had like our own Polish system, which was sort of a D&D ripoff. It was called the Time Crystals or the Crystals of Time, and it was basically a D&D on a slightly different set of rules. We had Warhammer, those were the first two. So everyone played this. So everyone played the classic adventures with princesses in the towers, the demons, the kobolds in the mines, and so on. And yeah, after some time, if you play, I mean, I guess it's different for everyone, but at least for me, after some time, you kind of get bored of those. I mean, I still enjoy playing the classic action-packed adventures from time to time, but this is not the thing I like the most about RPGs. So yeah, we started looking for something else, and back then we had to use the English. The systems were not translated. The games were not translated yet. So we used we actually learned a lot of English just by reading the books. So yeah, we got the hang of the vampire books and the werewolf line from World of Darkness. And it was something different, something fresh. I mean, suddenly the conflict was not about whether I can hit someone with my sword or hammer, but rather, can I persuade them to do something? Can we do something together? Or can I pull off this intrigue that I'm trying to do? Let's to be honest, there was still plenty of sword battling because vampire or werewolf are still full of fights, especially werewolf. But yeah, the whole social aspect of the game was like opening the experience to a different different kind of troubles, different kind of scenes. I mean, it was very exciting. So I guess we just stuck with it. This I met Kate like a year or two later because we met in high school, um, and been together since. But also, our playing group was mainly women, and I think that might be a factor. I'm not saying that all women want to play social games while all men want to play action games, but yeah, it's sort of naturally steered toward more social interactions, intrigues, and I guess we just stayed on this path.
I would have never thought of that. That's actually kind of cool.
Now, I remember um, early in my role playing experience, I had an all female group I was playing. I didn't know this was a factor, but it was an all female group, and uh, I felt like I was struggling. I was putting those amazing adventures and putting all those cobalt mines and stuff, and I mean, I felt like they were kind of enjoying the game, but not really quite there. So we had like the talk, and me as the GM, like, what would you like to play? What's wrong with the game? What can we do to make it more fun, more exciting? And uh, one of them, we're going nowhere with this. The talk took, I don't know, about 2 or 3 hours. We had so much time back in anyway, so yeah, so it's like a few hours talk about what we can do and different ideas coming around, and nothing seems to stick. I can feel there's a rapport. We're not getting anywhere. And then one of them said something like, "Have you ever watched the telenovela, a soap opera?" And yeah, sure, we all did. I mean, and could we try and play something like that? And at first, it felt I felt that first of all, if you like a teenager, you at least when I was a teenager, I felt like role playing games were something special and unique and almost an art form. And suddenly someone tells me to play soap opera, and it's like, no, this is sacrilege. This is something we can't do. But we all got to think about it, and we tried playing something like, well, what does it mean to play a soap opera? It means you have characters, there are stuff happening, and there's a lot of talking, right? Because in soap operas, there's far more talking than actual action. So we tried to set up like a simple adventure, kind of like this, with nobles coming to some sort of fantasy castle to talk about something, and it was great. Everyone was into it. The plot was exciting, and after that, we just sort of went more that way.
Interesting. So you spent a lot of time, at least at the start, doing the same thing. It sounds like I did with Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. But
Mhm,
the group dynamic influenced you towards something like a soap opera or a telenovela.
mhm.
Um, that's wow. I never really thought about what describing that kind of a game like a soap opera, but it does fit. That absolutely fits.
I wouldn't say that necessarily all the politics games or social games need to be like soap opera, but there's always this element of uh, illusion or playing tricks when you're playing RPG. I mean, there are no real battles, right? We're just sitting around the table and talking. We might have minis around and we roll for damage. So we're kind of pretending. We're kind of trying to create this illusion of something greater that there are real stakes, right? These are only minis that we're using on the battlefield, but we try to make it feel exceptional, like there are real stakes there. And with soap opera, pretty much the same. There are just a couple of actors, and they're just talking about stuff. But the idea is to make the, in this case, the viewer invested, emotionally invested. Like there's really something that it's really interesting. It's really important that the things they're going to say, and so in a way, this translates to role playing games because this is exactly what you sometimes try to do as a GM, make things sound exciting, interesting, and engaging, right?
I agree. And so that's kind of where I want to focus most of our time tonight is figuring out how to practically make those sessions engaging and in a way that kind of mimics the excitement of a combat, but obviously isn't the same as a combat.
Mhm.
So help us understand a little bit about how that evolved for you.
Mhm. Okay, so just to be on the safe side, I do not feel like I'm an expert on topic. I'm pretty sure there are guys and girls way more experienced than me. Uh,
None of us do.
so So I can talk about my experiences and the way I run my games, but this is just one person's point of view. Just to be clear about this. Um, so I was actually thinking because you talked to me or 2 weeks ago about this, or maybe it was last week. Sorry, we were just after the books, the Defiant books arrived here. We had well. A lot of work, so I might be missing a week. But anyway, we were talking last week about this conversation today, and I was thinking about it. Like, how would I describe if there's someone that does play classic RPGs, action RPGs, like let's call them like that, combat-oriented, action-oriented RPGs. So how would I go about describing and helping them move toward and try the more social politics-oriented RPGs? And I came up with something like this, and let me try this on you. Maybe it works. So if you are a GM and you do run action or combat RPGs, then you have an idea of how to do this. You have your way of doing it. And I don't know what your preferred way is, but there are some elements that I think are universal. So classic D&D session, like the combat oriented, action oriented session. There are heroes. There is some sort of treasure person they need to help at the end of the road. There are some problems along the way, and in the combat oriented adventure, those problems would be a pack of goblins in the forest, or I don't know, an angry wolf or a dragon, whatever you set on. And the game would go like the players have some time to rest, talk. Then they have a combat scene, and then the story progresses. Then there's another combat scene or an action scene until they get to the final point of the adventure. Again, I'm talking like about the very basic idea. So when if I were to help you understand how to run social adventures, I'd stick with this basic idea, but translate it to social stuff. So you when designing an adventure, you'd have to design encounters or combat scenes throughout the adventure, right? Like there would be goblins in the forest. Well, let's stick with the goblins. So when you're running a social game, adventure, whatever, um, you have to have social problems along the way. The goblins won't do because usually there's no talking with the goblins; they just attack you. This is a simple situation. It's us against them. But when you're running a social game, in place of those goblins, random encounters and stuff, you have to have some sort of social interactions, problems that can be solved through social interactions, not swords, not fireballs. not machine guns, but talking, swaying, lying, seducing, whatever works, right? Depending on the players and the nature of the problem. So the first thing I would do, and I think this is one of the most important parts, is remembering about the game mechanics. Because when you're running a combat during a D&D campaign or a D&D game, uh, you are using the game rules. That's normal for you, and the game does a lot for you because you've got your minis, or maybe playing the theater of the mind, but it doesn't matter. You've got the game rules. Everyone knows there's special rules or spells. They have their weapons, their hit points, all of this stuff that makes the combat exciting. And if you're running a social game and you're playing a game that has social rules, then use those rules, just like as you would use the rules for combat. Because what I've seen throughout the years, many GMs and players tend to forget about the rules when they go do social interactions. They do dialogues. It's normal. When you're the GM, so you're playing the NPC, you start talking, and okay, dialogue goes on. It goes smooth because we are social creatures. We know how to talk to each other. But when you throw the rules out of the window, then it's only a matter of what you as a GM think should happen that happens, because you're the only judge of the situation, and it's not exciting at all. It's a matter of getting through to you, the GM. Not it doesn't matter who my character is or what sort of social skills they have. It's only a matter of can I convince you, the GM, that the things I say are logical or make sense with the NPC. And I would strongly advise against this. I would strongly advise to use the game rules, to do the charisma rolls if there's nothing else in the game, or use any other. You've got, you were talking about Vampire the Masquerade. It has its own social rules. Use them, because without this, the social interactions won't be exciting. I mean, from time to time, they might be exciting. Just like if you would run a combat scene simply by doing a description of the combat. The players have nothing to do. The players, they can only say what they're doing, and you're not rolling any dice. You're just narrating the outcome. Sometimes, from time to time, this may be spectacular, and depends on your skill, I guess. But most often than not, quickly grows boring because nothing really can happen. It's all up to the GM. So when you're using social rules, you're suddenly the players need to beat the game, I guess, in order to succeed, and not simply convince you that they're good enough to succeed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, it does. It makes me think of Blades in the Dark and the idea of shifting the odds of success, but it's still a roll, right? So even
Mhm.
even in Defiant, you start out with a target number of a 5 or 6 on a six-sided die, but then you can upgrade the die to a D8 or a D10 by mechanics that grow from what is it, social skills or social abilities
Mhm.
that a different player has. Um, and
Yeah,
that
and it's
shifts the odds of success, but it's still random.
sure, and it doesn't really have to be random. What's important is that the player knows that their character succeeds because of who the character is, not because they just mm, talked, said the right word to the GM. It's like with combat. If a character were to succeed simply because he was the one to describe to the best extent the way he throws I don't know, an axe towards the enemy, then it wouldn't be really fun for everyone, because someone made a super strong barbarian and he wants to, but he just doesn't know how to describe this well, so he loses all the time because his stats don't matter at all. So yeah, it most of the time it is random. And you mentioned Blades in the Dark. Many games have different social rules. The more classic part by the Apocalypse games have the rule when you role, and you have to tell the GM what are you willing to. That depends on the game, I'm just sorry, because there's so many of them. But the GM tells you what the NPC needs from you in order to agree with you, and you can either give it to them or promise to give it to them depending on the number of your successes and such. So yeah, it's different in every game, but as long as the game does have some sort of social rules, use them. And sure, some games will be better from this. There are, but just the same as with combat. There are games that have great combat rules that are exciting and fun. Others that are hyper realistic or try to be as realistic as they can be. And it's I guess it's a matter of personal preference. But yeah, whatever rules you have in your game, use them.
So basically, what I'm hearing from you is treat it more like Divinity Original Sin over Mass Effect. I don't know if you've played those.
Yeah, I did.
But like in Mass Effect, you choose what you're saying to the guy, and you're either getting Paragon or Renegade. Whereas in Divinity Original Sin, you're actually having to do social interactions and quote unquote argue with them to get them around to your point of view by rolling dice.
Yeah. I mean, Mass Effect has its own social mechanics as well. If I remember correctly, because it's been quite a while since I played Mass Effect, there was this thing that I loved about Mass Effect and social interactions that when you choose dialogue options, you don't know exactly what you're going to choose. It's just like a vague yes, I agree, and then your character says this whole thing that isn't necessarily what you wanted to say, but it was quite fun for me just hearing what my character will say. But yeah, so a different set of rules. But yeah. If we go with those two, let's go the way you said. Yeah.
I play more video games than I do RPGs, and I play a lot of RPGs, but I just play a lot of video games. So, yeah.
Well,
all right. Looks like Fook has a question for us. How does one introduce more social encounters to a game as a player or game master that doesn't have solid or any social rules?
If a game does not have any social rules, then I guess you have to come up with your own. Though, if I were to suggest something, if you want to play social games, pick a game that has social rules. I mean, if you want to have cool combat, you pick a game with cool combat rules. So I'd go with it. But yeah, if you're set on a game, really want to use this one, and it has none or barely some social rules, then I guess you have to, well, improvise and come up with your own rules. This is not an advice I like to give to anyone because I'm a firm believer in sticking with the game rules.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the golden rule or the rule of cool, but
yeah, but even D&D now has some social ruling aspects to it.
Yeah.
Like in 5th edition, it's a charisma versus charisma, or charisma versus their level.
Yeah, there are
even
social rules
Pathfinder
in D&D.
does.
Mm-hmm.
I know that back at 3.5 and in 2e and 1e, first edition, they didn't really have social rules, but they've started adding them. So there's a lot of games that have social rules, even if they're not massive social rules. But I agree with you. If you're wanting a social game, you need to play a social game. Defiant is a wonderful social game. Blades in the Dark has lots of social aspects, which Court of Blades, a friend of ours just came out with, that's based on Blades in the Dark, is an extremely social game.
Yeah.
So
there are so
they
many.
exist.
The whole world of darkness has its own sorts of social rules. If I
I
was
haven't played as much Social Darkness. I haven't played as much in World of Darkness because last time I played, it was right when Twilight came out and they were LARPing, and one of the guys got mad at me because I was giving him crap for being covered in glitter.
if you if you want to play social games more Twilight-like, then I'd say Monster Hearts has great set of social rules.
That was the very first one that came to mind.
Yeah, but actually, that's a great example of a game that uses its rules to steer you towards their designed way of playing it. Because since Monster Hearts is sort of this erotic teenage supernatural flick, you get most of the social things done by using the what's the name of the move? Is it turn on? Yeah, it's turn on. So the teams are turning on each other all the time just to forward their social agendas. So different games go differently about this, and sometimes this is a core feature of the game.
So it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Monster Hearts. I'd say it's a bit of Buffy with a bit of Twilight, with a bit of the gory teenage semi-erotic slashers, B class slashers. I think Avery described it as a guilty pleasure RPG once, and I love this description because it's supposed to be a
Everyone
guilty
should
pleasure.
have a guilty pleasure RPG. I have mine, and we're not going to go into that. Fook, I'm going to tell you, like I've told you before, when it comes to something that you're a player in, you got to talk to the DM. Tell them what you want. If they don't give you what you want, then you might have to go somewhere else. And it's okay. You're not cheating on your GM if you need to go somewhere else for your fix. But you've still got to tell them. Say, hey, I want more social RPG, more social RP. If you don't tell them, then they won't know, and then they can't provide. If they're not comfortable providing, then that's when you start looking for somebody else who can provide.
It's a bit like I always use the sorry, it's a bit late. Anyway, it's a bit like taking a group of friends to the cinema. You need to be vocal about the things you want to watch or which you don't want to watch. Because if you don't like horror movies, you better tell them you don't like horror movies before you get to the cinema. Same goes if you're really into romantic comedy this evening, then tell them, because otherwise you might end up watching a movie you really don't want to watch, and it's no one's fault because you didn't tell anyone.
Well, and
Exactly.
remember too, you may have a different group of friends to go watch a horror movie with, and a different group of friends to go watch a romantic comedy with, and they can both be your friends.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, just looking at my notes, and we talked about the game rules. The other important aspect is if you want to have a meaningful social game, then when you're designing the problems you want to have in the adventure, like the goblins in the forest, you have to come up with problems that cannot be solved with pure violence, or can, but it will create more problems than not doing anything at all. Because if you're playing with players who are used to playing classic action-packed RPGs, then it's only natural for them to look for violence as the first option to get things done. So, as a GM, you have to clearly show them that in this particular scene or situation, violence is not the preferred option. It won't get them anywhere. It's not a matter of just coming out with 100 guards pointing crossbows at them or something, but creating situations like it may be really simple things, like they come to an inn and uh, there's a bride. There's supposed to be a wedding, like the daughter of the innkeeper. That just like everything. Everyone in the inn is getting ready for the wedding ceremony. Like everyone is excited, and suddenly someone comes to the group because I don't know. I'm just coming with this on the top of my head. There's some kind of local tradition that the first person to arrive here will serve as a maid of honor for the bride. whatever, anything like this. And so you put the players in the room with the young bride, and she just bursts into tears because now she's not sure whether she wants to marry the guy she's supposed to marry. And actually, it was her father's idea. This might be, and so on. You can come up with whatever you want. This is a type of situation where no amount of swords or fireballs will get the players to do something about this, right? So try to think out of the box. Try to think about the situations that really cannot be solved with violence. Um, it's actually quite fun when you start to put players in those situations because at the beginning they tend to be completely helpless. They're used to thinking about problems in a particular way and solving them. And suddenly there's this crying young bride that just doesn't want to go to the wedding. And what can they do? And again, this is when the rules are so important because you can always tell them, let's say it's D&D, just roll for charisma. Try to talk to her and roll. But because if they have no rules to hold on to, they might get completely lost in this situation.
That makes sense. So where do you find that you come up with the most ideas from? Yeah, are you an avid television watcher? Do you read and come up with the ideas? Are you just naturally a, a dramatic uh, conversationalist? Are
You're
you?
trying to ask whether I'm a type of a drama queen person who just loves drama all around
No,
her.
no, no. I did not use the word queen once.
It's hard to answer.
I'm the drama queen.
Uh, I guess I do watch a lot of series. I mean, I'm a typical streaming services watcher, I guess. I tend to binge a series or two a month. But is there any particular? I'm not sure at this point. There's since I've been playing those kind of games for 30 years now. So there's a lot of experience, I guess. But if I were to advise, I mean, we all know those situations. That someone crying, not wanting to do something, is not really that's abstract, out of place situation that we never seen. So I'd say,
Somebody's dad not wanting to eat broccoli.
yeah. So just think small. I guess that would be my advice. Don't try to come up with those over the top situations. Think small. People, we are all social creatures. We need to talk to each other and convince different people, talk to them, sway them, whatever, all the time in our life. Just uh, and this could be simple, like a bouncer outside of a club that doesn't want to, or a guard in the castle that doesn't want the players to come in. Someone having a bad day when they have to reach a decision that is crucial for the team, but I don't know, a judge having a terrible day, a terrible headache, and you need to persuade him to or her to make a decision that's going to be beneficial to the players, but they're clearly not in the mood because I don't know, they have a terrible headache. So just go with normal situations. We have those situations in our everyday lives all the time.
I like that. That's actually some of the best advice I've ever heard. Um,
Thank you.
no, seriously. Um, I, you know, when when I when I write adventures, when I write campaigns, I tend to think big and then reduce to the small. And it occurs to me that probably the reverse, like you're talking about, is the smarter way to deal with those kinds of situations, is to think about an individual person. And I don't know that I've ever really done that when I've prepped for a game. That's really interesting. I'm gonna have to think about that some now. Thank
So
you.
why you're
You have
welcome.
to. Oh, we're gonna argue. All right. I will point it out to you.
Okay,
Every
go ahead.
time every time you have made NPCs, you have always given the NPCs that you have made a purpose. What do they want? That's exactly what he's talking about. They want something, the character wants something. The social interaction is them trying to figure out how they're both going to get what they want.
That's fair, but most of the time when I'm thinking about that kind of a thing, the NPC is usually like take a big bad evil guy, right? So we're thinking grand scale. We're thinking, what do you want? I want to take over the kingdom. Okay, how am I going to do that? And there's a series of steps of, okay, I need to conquer this city. I need to sway this ruler. I need to off these PCs. I need to, convince this goblin tribe to work with me. I need to do all these things. And yeah, it's what he wants, but it's big. It's not I'm going to walk into a bar and there's this bouncer that's having a bad day because I don't know, his daughter brought home D's from high school or something like that. And, now he's got a grounder and she made pouty faces at him or something like that. That's so small on the scale of things that I've thought about with NPCs that it's like it barely even registered. But it occurs to me that for a social game, that's maybe a big thing.
I mean, in social games, you have, I guess, that in social games, you have to see like the person in your NPC, like their current state, because it's all important, right? The daughter with the high school problems is a perfect example. Like you need to know what makes this person tick, like in this very scene, this very moment, and you can play off it. You can have one of the PCs dressed in a similar way, or have, I don't know, uh, uh, the same bag as his daughter, which makes the bouncer even more furious because now he remembers about the stuff he needs to get to when he gets back home from work. But there's nothing wrong with thinking big. It's just that if you want to start doing social, it's like if you were to start doing D&D combat, then I'd also advise to like start with small encounters, and once you feel comfortable with those, go up if you want to, or just remain on the small scale if this is exciting for everyone. But so there's nothing wrong with thinking big, over the top social arcs, but if you're start somewhere simpler. There's also when it comes to rules, there is one unwritten that I think is quite important, because when you've got classic combat, you've got some sort of usually hit points, HPs, right? So you don't have hit points. And I mean, again, I'm generalizing here because there are plenty of games that have some sort of social hit points. But in most games, there are no obvious things that happen to the players if they fail a social situation. And I'd say that what the GM needs to remember is that the characters have their social standing. It doesn't have to be a number on the character sheet, but it works best if you're playing a game set in a single location, like a single city in a vampire, or a small kingdom in Dungeons and Dragons. So this is the question of what happens if the characters fail what they're doing. I mean, the obvious thing is like they're trying to make someone do something and he doesn't agree. So that's a simple situation. But usually, when players plan their actions during combat, they know that they need to protect their characters, because if the characters lose their HPs, their hit points, they die, right? So in social situation, the stakes are different, obviously, but it's nice to remind them that those stakes exist. Like, yes, they can make fun of, I don't know, the tavern owner, whatever reason, but he's not going to like them anymore, and probably the patrons of the taverns are going to be a bit hostile towards them. So if you're playing a game set in a single location, it's easy because the society, everyone around, tends to react somehow to the character's action. You were talking about video games. Have you played the God, what's the name of the Telltale games about the big bad wolf? Oh my God, I forgot the name of the game. It's such a good game. Uh, the game made on Fables, in the Fables universe, when you play the big bad wolf. Uh, is it Wolf Tales? Doesn't matter.
I have played Fable.
Okay, no, Fable is the one with the dog. No, not the one. Sorry, just let me check the name of the game because Telltale games. So good to have internet.
You sound like me. Hang on, let me check the name of this. I know what it is. Hang on, just give me a minute.
Wolf. The Wolf Among Us, of course. Sorry. Again, it's now past 3 a.m. in Poland. So yeah, The Wolf Among Us. You haven't played The Wolf Among Us, I guess.
No, never even heard of it.
Oh, you should definitely play it. It's one of the best games when it comes to
Telltale.
adventure
Oh, good.
RPG games. The Wolf Among Us is perfect, and there's actually going to be a second part of the game. But you should absolutely check it out. It's great. Anyway,
I just dropped a link in chat in case anybody wants it.
I'm in no way affiliated with Telltale Games. It's just an awesome game. Seriously. So in The Wolf Among Us, after you do different things, you get like the small communication from the game, like the town will remember this, or an NPC will remember this. Just this little hints that the things you do, influence the world around you. And I'd say those are the hit points in social games. Okay, you did manage to do things the way you wanted to do, but you made some enemies along the way. Some people will now actively work against you in the community. And if the players know that this might happen, the situation gets more exciting and engaging because they cannot simply brute force their way through a social situation because there will be some consequences.
That kind of sounds like Shadowrun's heat mechanic.
Yeah, plenty of games have different sort of mechanics. I think was it in the second edition first? Yeah, the hit mechanic in Shadowrun. Sorry, I haven't played Shadowrun for like 15 years.
Well,
No,
you
no,
know
no,
how in
thank you.
Shadowrun, how
Fifth
much
edition too.
attention you get gives you
Yeah.
heat.
Mm.
I recall it showing up in fourth, and then it was in fifth. I don't know
Yeah,
if it's in sixth because I got kind of perturbed when we got our sixth edition book, and it pretty much broke upon arrival, and they had 37 pages of errata. I was not a happy camper.
no. Well, my history with Shadowrun is we used to play a lot of Shadowrun in the 90s, and it became like this game that we talk a lot about playing. And there's this group that used to play in the 90s, and we was like, come on, let's do another Shadowrun run. And everyone is excited. And then we get to the books, we open it up, we got the character sheets, and we start to slowly just write down all the weapons we have and the ammunition. And somewhere there's like 3 hours, we're 3 hours into this, and then someone says like, guys, shall we skip this and do something else today? And then yeah, okay, man. Yeah, but then like a half a year or a year passes and everyone is excited again and we're going to play the Shadowrun just like we did in the 90s. So yeah, this is my recurring Shadowrun theme.
And that's why I always invested in Shadowrun generator characters.
But it's not the same.
No, it's not. But at the same time, after a while, you get tired of doing the math. You know, it's ugly.
Hey, look, Hero Lab was awesome for making Shadowrun characters. And so is Chummer, because then you don't have to do all the math. You just have to look stuff up. It does it for you. And that makes it so much easier to create a character because math sucks.
You were talking about games where the social currency is how far a group got swayed uh, in your favor or against you. Um, and we were speaking of video games earlier. One of the ones that brings to mind for me anyway was a game called Tyranny.
Hmm. Glad you brought it up because I was going to when John was talking about Mass Effect. I was going to
I
point
haven't
towards
gotten too
Tyranny.
far into it, but I always enjoyed watching the way the choices that you made affected the world around you.
Hmm. Definitely, but even in the beginning, there are two ways to create the character in Tyranny. There's the fast way and the I don't know if you tried the other one, where you just have this like mini story where you join two armies that are invading another country. And there are like two factions, there are two army generals of different types of armies, not to get into too many details. And you just have to choose. And there are like 20 or 15 choices before, like, oh, will the army get food provisions from here or will they go march somewhere? And whatever you choose, each time you choose something, it influences, it makes either one or the other faction like you more or less. And this then, well, this is then your starting situation when you start playing the actual game. So it's a nice mechanic to illustrate how you can make cool politics and factions uh, in your game. It doesn't in your RPG game. It doesn't really have to be about factions. I was talking about Master Hearts, and in Master Hearts, there's this rule for the game, like a rule for the GM that whenever someone's happy, someone else is hurting because it's a teenage drama, so it needs to be a lot. But you can use this like when you're saying about when talking about politics and factions, then yeah, whenever you're doing something for faction A, then this is kind of against faction B, so you just need to balance it out if you want, or just stick with one faction. And it can be the same with simple social interactions. If you're doing something for Tom, uh, Anna will be furious because she hates Tom or whatever, or she wanted the same thing, but now she cannot get it.
That makes a lot of sense. And from a game design standpoint, I mean, if you look at, I'll bring it up again, Blades in the Dark or Scum and Villainy or Defiant, you end up with 6, 8, 10, 12, 20, 30 factions that all want different things. It's not really hard to find, okay, I'm helping this faction. There's this other one somewhere, and I've got this massive list of factions that I'm hurting somehow. And so coming up with a antagonist or whatever, as long as you're not the one designing the game and having come up with the ideas, you just use a list as a GM and say, all right, here's what I've got available to me. Which one's going to hurt the most?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, this is a way to go about this, but I think it's really time consuming. If I had to have a list of like 30 factions with their agendas and goals, that sounds hard. Uh, what I
Wasn't
do,
there a D&D adventure that you complained about that had too many factions to keep track of?
Yes, there was. Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil.
yeah, haven't only read it, haven't played it. Oh, sorry, lost my train of thought. Okay, uh, I'm back. So what I do in this situation is rather than having 30 factions, I'd make three, just three different factions with clear leaders. Like this is a vampire lord. Let's stick with vampire. Who wants to take over the city? Wants to be the new prince? So who's the prince of the city? Because I was playing vampire in Polish, so I'm trying to. Yeah, but I think it's the prince of the city, right? Okay, so
Yep.
he wants to be the prince of the city, and this is another. This is like a vampire, super old vampire that wants to, I don't know, bring back a powerful blood goddess, whatever. So you've got like those three factions. Three is always better than two because there's the balance is more interesting. But you've got three factions, and you've got this party with 30 NPCs or something, and the players piss off one of the NPCs. They're technically not part of any of those factions, uh, and I can understand what you're saying. I could just make this NPC a new faction, or just mm, come up with a faction they're a part of. But rather than that, I'd always say that since there are those three most powerful factions, then everything the players do towards the NPCs steers those NPCs towards one of the factions. So if one of those three factions, the Vampire Lord, is clearly against the players, hates the players, and just goes out of his way or her way to make their life miserable. And somehow during this vampire party, the players had some sort of standoff with another vampire. Then the vampire will likely join the faction that is against the players because they're angry at the players, so they just want to join the faction. And all you have to keep a track of is which NPCs are in which faction. Because otherwise, with 30 factions, it's really hard to manage this. At least it would be for me.
That makes sense. Minimize the number of factions, but let the NPCs be free to join any of them.
Yeah, exactly. They don't have to join them like officially. It's like the factions don't have to have like official memberships. So yeah, they can transfer between the factions and steer towards some of them, join them, or be an unlikely ally to one of them.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Another question. Does knowing what social encounters are coming take away the surprise of events of what will happen?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. Uh, I mean, what do you mean by knowing the social encounters? Would you mind repeating the question again?
So I think what he's asking is if you design an adventure around, say, the wedding,
Mhm.
okay, and you let players know that this is going to be the central thrust of that adventure. Does that take away the surprise of events that'll happen?
I mean,
And
mhm.
I think based on what I've heard tonight, the answer would be no, because you're allowing the social mechanic, to at least partially dictate some of what happens. So, if there's like for instance, in Blades of the Dark, you've got a success with complications, right? So if you roll a 3 or 4 on a 6-sided die, you succeed at what you were doing, but something else happens, right? It's a yes and. And so if you allow for outcomes like that, then you can know, okay, yeah, we're going to have this wedding, and at the end of the day, this person's going to marry this other person, but there are some potential complications that come along the way as choices are made, and there aren't unqualified successes, there aren't great successes or whatever you'd call them. There's these successes with complications, to where the GM can introduce little twists here and there that may or may not affect things that session, or may come back to bite you 2 sessions from now.
I think that when you're thinking about social games, you can think about them exactly the same way as you would think about an action adventure. So it doesn't have to be a railroaded experience. It can be open-ended. Just as when you have a classical adventure, then there's I don't know, there are the goblins you have to fight in the forest. That doesn't mean you know everything about what's going to happen. We had the example of the wedding. who says the wedding that the adventure cannot end with the bride sneaking off with the players into the night, running away from the wedding, which she really didn't want. So it can be just as open-ended as a action adventure, just as the action adventures can be really straightforward and railroading. Like there's a treasure, you need to get into the dungeon, kill off the monsters, and get back with the treasure. So as for the element of the surprise or the knowing what's going to happen, there's no there's no reason why you should know what's going to happen in a social adventure more than in a classic adventure.
So yes, to answer your question, Fook, it's not necessarily about putting that player on the spot. They can know what's kind of going to happen, but it's still if they make different choices, or if they and the party make other choices that can induce an alternate timeline or something like that, or like Martin mentioned, it maybe the wedding doesn't happen. Maybe the bride goes off with the party and they run away, and she wants them to escort her to some other town somewhere so that she can live out her life as, I don't know, a tavern uh, barmaid or something. Whatever. That's her dream. Um, they can do that. They have that choice, that freedom, um, and it doesn't have to put them on the spot with something that they didn't know was coming. They knew that the wedding was coming. It's what did they choose from there? But I agree with Martin. It's not particularly different from um, a classical action adventure type of a scenario, right? Just because you're going to attack the goblins in the wood and try and clear out a warren of goblins doesn't mean that there's not a bugbear hiding out there that's leading them or something like that, or a
That
hill
the
giant or
goblins
something.
or that the goblins actually manage to be victorious and take you as prisoners or whatever else happens. It's role-playing games, right? A lot of
But
things can happen.
that's right.
Yeah, I've also came up with a few tips that are, some of them I feel are quite important, like while others are just small tips. But I thought I'd share it with you guys because
Wonderful.
I was just writing down whatever came to mind. So the first thing I wrote down is that in social games, actually, it's a good tip for all role-playing games, but especially in social games, try to remember that no man is an island, and try to create the problems in such a way that the players need outside help. It's a great way to put more emphasis on social interactions, because you need someone to help you in order to achieve your goal. So you need to sway that person. You need to somehow make this person work with you or help you or support you or whatever.
So
And
you're talking about an NPC, not other
yeah,
player characters.
yeah, the NPC,
Yes.
the player characters, and that's normal, have usually a tendency to figure out the relationships simply because by the players talking to each other. So there can be great social games for it. There can be great social interactions between the player characters, but I was referring to NPCs in this example. Um, Another thing that I think is really important is good communication when it comes to descriptions, because when you're playing classical combat, action, whatever, it's easy. I mean, easy. Well, it's easier because you say like there are 12 goblins coming at you and two of them have bows, or you just get your minis out and everything's clear for the players. They know what's happening. It is important. They have to know. They have to know whether they're in the range of the fireball or whatever. Well, when it comes to social games, it becomes a bit more complicated because, well, we can interpret the reality quite differently. So the thing that was quite a problem for me and took me quite a while to figure out was how to put across how I see the NPCs. Like, I want an NPC that is, I don't know, attractive. There's a guy, and he's supposed to be an attractive guy. Like, he's supposed to walk into the club, and he's in the or wherever ballroom, and he's an attractive guy. So I'd go with, well, what makes the guy attractive? So I'd go with, I don't know, he's tall and muscle, and he looks like an American wrestler or whatever. And sometimes I'd hit the target, but most of the times I would be totally off. And what I came up with, which is quite easy, and I, it's kind of weird that it took me years to get to this, is telling the players what I think about the NPC. So before starting the actual description of an NPC, I'd go with the impression they make. I'd say a really attractive guy walks into the bar. And then I go with a minimal description. Like, I don't know, he's this dark haired, dark long haired, has this look in his eyes, whatever, mysteries. But I always start with the impression. An attractive guy walks into the bar. There's a girl, there's a woman standing in the corner of the room, and she's clearly in a bad mood. I'm not going to talk about the faces she makes. I'll start with the mood, because when we read other people's, when normally normal human interactions, we read people. Sometimes better, sometimes worse, but we have our own impression, and we don't need to analyze every move. We do this sort of automatically. So as a GM, I need to be this automatic interpretation of people. The guy is attractive. The woman is in a bad mood. This guy is off-putting. And for years, I tried to, rather than doing this, I tried to describe the person so that I'd make the impression I want to make. And most of the time, I'd fail because it's really hard if you're not a perfect actor and I don't know, some an expert novelist or whoever, then you just can't, in a few words, tell someone a perfect description that matches what you have in your head. So just go with the impressions. Go with.
That
Mhm.
that actually reminded me what you were saying of like a novelist, right? That as much as I think um, it's it's an aspirable goal to be a very eloquent descriptor and things like that. As a GM, yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think maybe it's a waste. If you just come out and you telescope that punch and you say, all right, this guy's upset. He looks upset, and go on, and maybe give a little bit of description after it, but you handicap the players, right? You say, this is what I'm expecting you to get from this.
Yeah,
Now, what do you
especially
do
since
about it?
yeah, especially since in the normal situation they know this guy is upset. Because when you see a guy and he's upset, I mean, he's not trying to hide it, then you usually know the guy's upset. This is just how we work. We can read other people. We can read their facial expressions, and but we're not that good about talking about someone's facial expressions just to put through the idea of them being upset. So it is time efficient, obviously, because but first and foremost, this is a better mean of communication. Just communicating the impression of others. In novels, there's this rule that you should show and not tell, which is a great rule for novelists because it makes for a more interesting descriptions. But I'd say that in RPGs, most of the time, it's better to tell rather than show. After you tell about the impression, you can illustrate it. You can say the guy is upset, and then say about him just clearly. I don't know. My English is way not on the level for me to to describe an NPC in a meaningful way. Yeah, but you can describe the things that give off the sense of him being upset. But start with saying he's upset.
I like that. That's actually some really good advice.
Okay, the one. Okay, I'm reading my own notes and trying to figure out what I meant. Okay, I know. So another thing is when you're playing combat in an RPG game, um, the ending is quite clear. Usually, it ends with either one side victorious, the other dead or retreating or whatever. Like there's a clear ending to a combat scene, and that's good. That keeps the story sharp, interesting, and um, the problem of social interaction is that there's usually no clear ending to a social interaction. Like you can talk to the NPC literally forever. You can just talk, and he doesn't agree with you, so the party still talks and tries different approaches, and it can take hours. So what I'd suggest for the GM is to come up with different few different conversation enders. Like you're talking to an important NPC and you're trying to convince them, but you're failing, and it's okay. You're trying different approaches, and after some time, his assistant walks in the room and says something like, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we need to go now. They're waiting for you." And they just leave because otherwise you can get stuck in the situation. Okay, the players failed. They need to find another way to reach their goal. They didn't manage to convince the NPC. It's okay. But if you leave them in the room with the NPC, they will try and try all over again because they want to succeed. That's normal. So you have to have there's plenty. If you watch series, the many series, this all the time because there's plenty of dialogues in the series. There's always some sort of event that breaks the dialogue before its natural conclusion. Because in dialogues, natural conclusions usually are well quite boring because or the emotions are getting lower and lower and lower until I'm unsatisfied. It's okay, but and from time to time it's okay in games as well. But to keep it more dynamic, just cut after some time. Just cut the dialogue through some outside interference, something happening. Of course, if the social scenes that the players are failing it miserably, the NPC can just storm off angry at them. That's okay. But I'm talking about those situations where there's no clear winner, there's no clear conflict. It just
Have an outside thing come in and end the scene.
exactly leave it like that because it's not a combat scene. It's not going to end organically by one side defeating the other.
That
Well,
makes
that's kind
sense.
of good. But just remember to have something at hand when it's needed. Okay. Another important thing that you know when you're running a combat game, but not really social. Uh, if you're running a combat game, you know that it can be that if you like, there's this first goblin group, but you've got this whole adventure with the goblins in the forest, and then the kobolds in the mines, and then the demon lords in the castle. Defeating the first goblins cannot end the adventure. The players cannot accidentally find the treasure they were looking for in the goblin camp, right? Because there's the whole adventure and there's the whole castle and the demon lord or whoever.
Yeah.
So in the social games, remember that uh, a single dialogue cannot finish the quest. So, like, if the game is about making someone change their mind about someone influential, like a lord, whoever, changing their mind about, I don't know, taxating the villagers, because he's a tyrant and he has those terrible taxes, and the villagers are mm, starving, and the players are to convince the lord to change his ways. If you put the Lord in the first conversation, the first scene, and the players talk with them and roll a natural 20, whatever, they can just persuade the Lord to change the taxes, and your adventure is finished. So if you frame it this way, you can potentially fail the whole thing just simply because the players achieved too much through a single dialogue. So if you want the Lord to have, if you want to have the Lord in the first scene, then you have to come up with a good reason why they cannot simply change the tax. Perhaps they need to pay the king or someone. The taxes are just needed. They cannot simply agree to the terms. Or just do not put the Lord in the first scene. The players need to get to the Lord, and now we get back to the bouncer or the guard. Like they need to get in the good graces with a noble in order to be able to reach the Lord and talk to them about the taxes, right?
That makes
Because
sense.
yeah, the goblins in the first camp cannot have the treasure that the players are looking for, because otherwise the adventure will end there. And there's really much you can do with a single dialogue, even in our world. This, if you got enough charisma, you can really achieve a lot just by talking to someone. So this is something you have to keep in mind when designing a social game. Okay, what do I have? Yeah. Oh, the problems with lying. Mm, this is something that's been quite a problem for me as a player as well as the GM, because I don't know if you have the same experience, but players tend to believe the NPCs. Like if the NPC tells them, well, yeah, and it's an actual problem because if you want to run a social game, most of the NPCs, like I guess most of the humans, tend to lie because they want to get away. Sometimes this is like a nefarious scheme and they're lying because it's a great intrigue. Sometimes people lie just because they don't want to sound rudely or be nice to someone or whatever. There are plenty of reasons to lie. So the NPCs lie all the time. This is normal, just as the player characters do usually. But I found it quite difficult to communicate to the players that I mean maybe not communicate. The problem I had was the players usually didn't get that the NPC was lying. They didn't do I don't know like sort of social skill check. If an NPC said something, they usually accepted this as truth, and this is it's sorry again because because I there's nothing wrong with the player characters knowing that the NPC is lying. Now they can try to get the truth out of the NPC or act upon the lie and do whatever. So what I started doing was clearly showing the players the NPC is lying. Like if I want my NPC to lie, I show this to the players. My NPC is like cartoonish when they lie. It's just, yeah, there are no problems here, sir. Everything is perfectly fine. No. Everything is great. Thank you for asking, but there are absolutely no problems. Sorry. No problems here, sir. So I'm cartoonish about this, and this is when the players know. Okay, so maybe I'd like to do the social role to check whether he's lying but because when you're at the GM, it's really easy to manipulate the player characters because you've got all the cards in your hand. Like you are the reality. So I just figured it's way more fun to show them whenever NPCs are lying or and doing anything of sort, and just have them interact with this, do something about it. Otherwise, the NPCs tend to just lie on the players. Okay, this may be useful if you want to like get the players into a trap, right? But most of the time, it's way more fun if they catch the NPC on the lie, because this is an exciting, dynamic social interaction. We know you're lying. What are you hiding? Wherever, right?
That makes sense. And with when you spend a lot of time lying, it's kind of like in traditional games traps, right? If you put a trap or two or three in every single room that the players go in, you slow the game down to a halt because they're constantly looking under every dust scrap and pebble and behind every wall and door and up on the ceiling for traps, and you never actually get anywhere. If you're constantly lying to the PCs in such a way that you're deliberately trying to mislead them all the time, they're not going to believe anything you say. And then when they try and find out the truth, it's going to take them forever to believe that they've actually found out what you want them to find out because they're expecting the lie. So yeah, I agree. You want to. It's almost like the telling them that the NPC is upset. You want to telescope that punch in such a way that they'll be able to do something about it, that's meaningful to their PCs.
Yeah, because I think it's a problem, but because on the one hand you have the suspension of disbelief. When you're playing, you want to be in the game world. You want to experience what your character is experiencing, and this is fun. On the other hand, you've got the dialogue with the GM. The thing about lying, the first time this really hit me. I was playing Werewolf. I was the player in this, and we were playing Werewolf the Apocalypse, and there wasn't even a lie. It was something that I blew my mind because my character was talking to an NPC, is girlfriend NPC, and I mean girlfriend or girlfriend doesn't matter, but and they were talking about another NPC, and my character was suspecting the other NPC of being a villain of the adventure, and so he says something like, "I believe this guy has some ulterior motives in what he does." And the NPC looked at my character as something. No, he wouldn't hurt a fly. He's a gentle human being. He's a good man. And I just went with it because this was my friend telling me this, and I knew that the NPC friend wouldn't lie to me. So I just went with it, and I missed the adventure completely because of this. And I talked with my wife actually because she was GMing this, and we talked after the game that what went wrong. I somehow missed the whole intrigue, and she went, well, I don't know, you didn't get that the guy was the villain. And then I remembered I was talking to my friend about this and asked her about this, and she said he's a good guy, and she said, yeah, but she's in love with him, and yeah, she believes he's a good guy. That's what she'd say, because this hit me, because this is like an unspoken rule. I didn't think an NPC would unwillingly lie to me about this, because I was trying to get a lead about someone, and my friends told me, no, you don't have to worry about this guy. And it was in normal life, this would be a perfectly normal situation. Someone has feelings for someone else, so he sees them in better light than they should. Uh, and that's absolutely normal in our world, in our lives. But in the game world, this ruined the game, because NPCs need to be, in my opinion, NPCs need to be a bit more. I'd use the term cartoonish in what they do. If if I were to run the same adventure now, then the female NPC would say something like, "No, he wouldn't hurt a fly because he's perfect in every possible way," and that would definitely give this away. Like, the players would know that, okay, that's not something I have to concern myself with, because she clearly has no judgment, no clear judgment here. So
That
yeah.
makes sense too. Yeah. Well, it's almost 10 o'clock here, and it's almost what 3 o'clock there. So
Actually, it's almost 4.
4. Oh golly. Well, I'll tell you what. We really appreciate having had you on, and I don't know about anybody in the audience, but I personally learned a lot, and I'm really glad for a lot of the advice that you've given. We're both Big fans of Defiant, and we're both really excited to try it out.
So
We're
nice to
we're
hear.
eagerly awaiting our physical copies with
Which
bated
you
breath.
unfortunately will have to wait sometime more because they should
Yeah,
be
I
like
know.
in early May. So I feel terrible about this. We're literally waiting for a cargo ship to take the container and just ship it to States from Germany. Because it's kind of
Everybody's
important.
having shipping problems. It's okay. We get it. But
If you're in the EU or UK, then you're getting the book in the next few days. But as for the States, it will take a month.
that's all right. We'll figure it out. In the meantime, though, like I said, thank you for coming. It's Martin from Game Machinery. They just released, or they're releasing Defiant. I believe you can find the whole product now on Drive-Through RPG, at least
There it is. Found
electronic.
it. It
There's the
exists.
hard copy. It's not a lie. It's not a cake. It's real.
Yeah, it's real.
And
It's real.
incredibly sexy artwork.
Cool.
Fantastic job. We enjoyed the heck out of it, and so we look forward to playing that and doing some social gaming of our own. So
Awesome.
um, yeah, we're here every weekend, Sunday night. Although that's going to probably switch every other Sunday for the next little while, due to the internet issues that we've got going on with streaming. But we're still kicking. We're still reviewing. I'm still writing that Defiant review around me trying to be in a new job, so that's taking longer than it used to.
Love to read it.
It will get done and it will get posted, and so yeah, that's where we're at.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun. I do apologize for for me losing focus from time to time. It's really late. Like the
It's
whole
4
week
a.m.
madam.
You're allowed.
But thank you so much for having me. I had a blast, and well, if it wasn't for the hour, I'd say that I hope to meet you again soon. But I'll do my best.
I
Uh,
don't blame you.
Really looking forward to hearing how your game went and if any of the things we talked about today, and if my experiences helped with anything in your game stuff. Would be awesome.
I'm looking forward to trying it out. So from our Citadel to yours, then happy gaming.
Happy gaming.